call on the Right Honourable Chris Hipkins.
Mr. Speaker, it's difficult to put into words what a huge and momentous day this is for New Zealand, and no one will be feeling that more than the survivors of abuse in state and faith-based care, whose experiences have been heard and now told by the Royal Commission. As I look in the gallery, Mr. Speaker, I see many familiar faces. I want to acknowledge you, the survivors, for your strength, your courage and your perseverance. How long and hard you have fought. Many of you have dedicated your lives to this fight, and many of you have dedicated your lives to protecting and being a voice for future generations so that they do not have to endure what you have. We see you, we hear you, and we thank you. And whilst a formal apology is still some time away, we are sorry. As a society and as a country, we are sorry. For too long, across governments, across generations, far too many people have turned their backs on you. The state and its institutions not only allowed this abuse to happen, it then denied you your voice and, worse, covered up the extent of the atrocities that took place. Mr. Speaker, debts come in many forms, not just financial, and New Zealand owes an enormous debt to the survivors. The Royal Commission has shone a light on a nationwide, intergenerational shame for New Zealand. We must finally hear the voices of the survivors, and we must take action. Reading the report, Mr. Speaker, I cannot imagine how it would feel to be told as a child that nobody loves you. And then, for those who were entrusted to care for you, to then set about demonstrating that through their actions. I cannot imagine the trauma, the lifelong trauma that would have inflicted. I was moved by a quote relatively early in the report from one of the survivors. I was always unwanted as a little kid, and now I always think I'm unwanted by other people or my partners. The trauma endures. The trauma doesn't go away. Abuse in state care took many forms: shame, humiliation, physical abuse, physical violence, sexual abuse, sexual violence, weapons, electric shocks, drugs, deprivation, isolation. The burden of abuse in state care afflicted some sections of our population more than others. Tamariki, rangatahi and Pakeke Māori were often targeted due to ethnicity, and as the report finds, this was often overlaid with racism. Pacific children were similarly targeted, deaf and disabled as well. The survivors live on a day-to-day basis with the consequences of that abuse, but so do we as a society. The report asks the question, how did this happen? And I want to quote directly from the report a sobering finding. Quote, society's discriminatory attitudes towards difference, including racism, ableism, disabledism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, punitive attitudes towards whānau and individuals who need support, all had one thing in common. They devalued and dehumanised children, young people and adults in care. Mr. Speaker, those words are a siren call to all of us today. They are a ruler that we should measure our actions today against. because the abuse and state care is not over. And I want to quote another sobering passage from the report. Most of the factors that led or contributed to abuse and neglect during the inquiry period continue to persist. Mr. Speaker, if this inquiry is to mean anything, we must consider the voices of the survivors in the actions that we take today as we respond to contemporary challenges of today. Mr. Speaker, I want to, in that regard, quote again directly from the report, make sure I get the right quote, and it's from Dr. Rawiri Waratini Karina, who was quoted right at the start of this report. I was 18 when I walked into the yard, never been to prison before. I walked out into the yard and there were 50 men there. I knew 45 of them. That's because they were beside me in the social welfare homes, the family homes, and the boys' homes. So that's when I realised there was a pipeline to prison process. Mr. Speaker, we must remember that. We must acknowledge that the shameful history of abuse and state care has led to prisons overflowing with some of the survivors of that abuse. Gangs contain survivors of that abuse. Mr. Speaker, I want to address the Prime Minister and thank him for his words. Our government set up this inquiry and we'd made some changes. We changed the redress rules on an interim basis, and we did set up the Survivor Experiences Board, but Prime Minister, we didn't do enough. And the ball now falls to you and your government. This must be bigger than politics. Mr. Speaker, we owe it to the survivors and to future generations to finally deliver justice and to finally end the ongoing abuse that happens in state care. This work will extend beyond the life of any one government, so we should work together to make sure that happens. Mr. Speaker, I finally want to end with the words of the Royal Commission and how they began their report, because I want those words to be read into the record of the House. Greetings to you who came to us with nothing in your hands, with sorrow clouding your hearts, the burden of guilt weighing heavily on your very being, spirits crushed by the shame that still pervades your minds, proffering a simple prayer: deliver us. We listened to your anguished memories, heard the sobbing of your hearts, and have been tasked to give you solace from the harsh winds of time, resolution from the gravity of your abuse. May the unseen hand of providence shine upon you, the wisdom of the ages guide you, and that the truth and justice we have sought together may find you respite. Finally, let us pay homage to those who did not see the end of this long journey. Those of you who now rest beyond the collective realm of memories, into the deep recesses of night, we bid you farewell. Sleep in eternal serenity, in the embrace of your ancestors. While your voices are now silent, your words will endure. Rest in peace. And in that peace, we hope you find solace in this report.
The question is, the motion be agreed to. I call on Chloe Swarbrick.